So, the first reading I would like to share with you today is from Odd Hours by Dean Koontz. Grief can destroy you or focus you. You can decide a relationship was all for nothing if it had to end in death and you alone. Or you can realize that every moment of it had more meaning than you dared to recognize at the time. So much meaning it scared you. So you just lived, just took for granted the love and laughter of each day and didn't allow yourself to consider the sacredness of it. But when it's over and you're alone, you begin to see that it wasn't just a movie and a dinner together, not just watching sunsets together, not just scrubbing a floor or washing dishes together or worrying over a high electric bill. It was everything. It was the why of life, every event and precious moment of it. The answer to the mystery of existence is the love you shared, sometimes so imperfectly. And when the loss wakes you to the deeper beauty of it, to the sanctity of it, you can't get off your knees for a long time. You're driven to your knees not by the weight of the loss, but by gratitude for what preceded the loss. And the ache is always there, but one day, not the emptiness. Because to nurture the emptiness, to take solace in it, is to disrespect the gift of life. Good morning. That was from Odd Hours by Dean Koontz. And excuse me, I have a very friendly fly here, so if you see me waving, it's not hot flashes, Amanda. So we're in right now what feels to us like a unique time in history. I think Maggie just mentioned that, right? Global pandemic, racial and political tension, natural disasters, wars, conspiracy theories. And at the core of all the things that are going on in the world right now lies grief. I'm hard pressed to think of someone that I know who has not lost someone that they love or care about in the last few years. As humanity struggles with finding its way in the new dynamic that we're experiencing, how do we find a way to lift ourselves up in the midst of grief? And as I was pondering that question, I received the image of a pearl. And I'd never thought about a pearl in terms of grief before. But the more that I contemplated it, the more sense it began to make to me. A pearl is created when an intruder, a grain of sand, or a bit of floating food, slips between the oyster shells and embeds itself in the oyster. In order to protect itself from irritation, the oyster covers the irritant in layers of nacre, part of its shell, until a gem is formed. So a pearl, a gemstone made precious by the fact that it's the only gemstone in the world that comes from a living creature. The oyster takes the source of its pain and coats it with beautiful layers of its own shell, its own essence. So the thing that has caused the pain never goes away. It just becomes a beautiful core of the pearl, a core that, although no longer painful, is always there. So, can we learn to view grief not as a sad and heavy experience, but instead as a transformational one? Yes, like the creation of our pearl, our journey through grief is one that's birthed from pain. But also, like the pearl, the end result can be something beautiful and precious. So, I told you I'd never thought of a pearl from the perspective of grief, but as I started researching, I found out that there are ancient legends that speak about pearls being created from tears. During ancient times, the Japanese believed that the tears of mythical creatures created pearls. So some of these creatures were nymphs, mermaids, angels. But there's another really interesting legend that I would like to share. So I have another excerpt for you, from you. It's from the Bible, the Quran, and the Talmud by Dr. G. Wheel, and it was written in 1863. And one of the stories he recounts in this book is an ancient Islamic legend about Adam and Eve after they were cast from paradise. So he says Adam shed such an abundance of tears that all beasts and birds satisfied their thirst therewith. But some of them sunk into the earth, and as they still contained some of the juices of his food in paradise, produced the most fragrant trees and spices. Eve was also desolate in Jeddah, for she did not see Adam, although he was so tall that his head touched the lowest heaven, and the songs of the angels were distinctly audible to him. She wept bitterly, and the tears which flowed into the ocean were changed into costly pearls, while those which fell on the earth brought forth all beautiful flowers. So if Eve's tears transformed into pearls and gave rise to beautiful flowers, is it so far off to think that our own grief can also be transformed? So today we're going to look at how this transformation can work. And while we're doing that, I'm going to give you some examples from my journey with grief. So those of you who've been in my classes or circles, you know that I often use stories from my own journey as a way to convey something. Your journey, it's never going to look exactly like mine, and I can't take this journey for you as much as I wish that I could. But I can share with you my own experiences in the hope that there's something in them that can help you on your way. So the first thing that happens in the creation of our pearls is the pain. When we talk about the passing of a loved one, this feels more than just a grain of sand or a bit of floating food. More like a shard of glass that is the core of this pearl. My husband Ken passed away unexpectedly, and the night that it happened was horrendous. It was my own Armageddon. There weren't four horsemen or a plague of locusts. World War III hadn't begun. There was no nuclear strike. And yet, my entire world had been destroyed in one moment. And suddenly my life felt like a barren desert, an apocalyptic wasteland. I'm not sure how I got through. I remember feeling as if I'd been thrown to my knees, and honestly, that feeling continued for quite a while. But I did get through that first night, and the next day, and the next, and the next. But I got through by just going, 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 not allowing myself to stop. So that's the beginning phase, the core, the period where you believe you will be overwhelmed by the pain if you allow yourself to feel it completely. Feels as if your life has ended and you will just continue forever on autopilot. The period before you realize that your tears, like Eve's, have the ability to create a precious pearl, to birth something beautiful in the cracks of your broken heart. So you just keep moving so that you don't have to feel the pain. Now, for me, this period lasted somewhere around 10 months. For some, it may pass more quickly. For others, it may last much longer. But eventually, the layers of the pearl start to form around that shard of glass. You slowly begin to understand that grief is the price of love. The precious memories, the joy associated with your loved one, those begin to form that first soothing layer of nacre. You allow yourself to gingerly touch that spot in your heart sometimes. You smile when you think of them, or when you find a card or a note they wrote you. The overwhelming emotions of guilt, fear, loneliness, worry, sadness, those still come, but you're willing to step into them a little bit more as they slowly become ever so slightly less painful. And you begin to recognize that even those heavier emotions, they're precious. Gifts reminding you that you have experienced incredible love. Tom Landon expressed it really well to me in an email that he sent me right after I gave my grief class. He said, grief as an experience or emotion is one of those moments where all your attention is on the emotion you're going through. Allowing that to be will give you space to then appreciate and be thankful for both that emotion and to whatever is attached to that emotion. I can't count the number of times I've just spontaneously started crying, allowing it to just be, and then being able to realize the gift of that moment. Such beautiful words, Tom. Thank you. And so the layers continue to build. As you begin to feel and release the all encompassing, heavy, painful emotions, you begin to allow yourself to open up to the signs that your loved one is trying to send. So, my phone at the time was a Galaxy S Note that Ken had given me. Now, the S Note had a little notebook app that you could write on with a stylus. And I really only used it for grocery lists. But when he had first given it to me, I discovered that it could write in colors. And I had excitedly drawn this big pink heart with Renee plus Ken inside it. He wasn't overly impressed, but I really had never thought about it again. And then one day after he passed, I was getting out of the car and I grabbed my phone and up popped this big pink heart. Now I realized there was no reason why it should have popped up. If it was just accidentally opening to the notebook app, it would have been to a grocery list, which is the only thing that I had used it for in the last couple of years. And I have another story. So my car had been a lease car that was in Ken's name, and we hadn't even made the first month's payment on it. And I had to turn it in and get a new car in my own name, right? Now I wear my glasses when I'm driving, and I always just pulled them off when I stopped driving and threw them in the drink holder, because the only time I wore them was when I was driving. So one day after I got this new car, I pulled into my driveway, threw my glasses in the drink holder, and suddenly the glasses holder on the ceiling console popped open. And I just closed it quickly, and then I stopped for a moment and I looked over at the passenger seat and I thought, if Ken was sitting here in the passenger seat right now, he would, in his own unique way, look at me, open up that glasses holder, and say, "Hey, Renee, look, they actually make something for you to put your glasses in." So I started putting my glasses in the eyeglass holder from that day, and it never popped open again. So those signs, those symbols from your loved one, they lead you to that next comforting layer of the pearl. You begin to look more closely at your beliefs. What happens to us after we leave these bodies? You search for answers. You search because you need to understand that they're okay. You search because you need to understand what you're receiving. Is it all in your mind? Did I make all of that up? Or could they possibly be reaching out to you? So, August of the next year, I was driving home from work when a commercial for the Long Island Medium came on the radio. And I had never thought about going to a medium before that. And suddenly, Lily Dale popped into my head. I'd read about Lily Dale in a young adult series years before. So that was a Wednesday. That Saturday, when I was done working at the part-time job, I left for Lily Dale. Now, I remember before I left telling Ken nonstop, "You better show up, you better show up, you better show up." And on the way to the thruway, I turned down this quiet side road and I saw a cardinal. And he was just sitting on the shoulder of the road. He didn't move when I drove by. He was just picking at the dirt. And I knew that was a sign that I was doing the right thing. So I visited my very first medium, and Ken definitely showed up. It was the most spiritual experience I've ever had. So I drove home the full 5 hours playing the CD of the reading over and over. And I stayed in shock for about 2 days. And then I decided that if that medium could talk to Ken, well, then I darn well could too. After all, he was my husband, not hers. So I launched myself on a journey searching for answers. And ultimately, it's that journey that led me to ISD, and it's why I'm here today. And the layers continue to build. As you travel forward, as you learn and delve into questioning who we are, you may begin to understand one of the universe's most awe-inspiring enigmas. that we are separated from others by these bodies, these shells that we're encased in, and yet we're still a part of the whole, connected to each other and the all by our souls, and they need no containers to exist. Separation is an illusion, and this too is the truth that will lead us to add more layers to our precious pearl. While we're on this journey, we experience things from the perspective of our own universe, sometimes forgetting that our consciousness is part of a much bigger divine tapestry. You begin to see this when you're led to others who have struggled with or are also struggling with grief. You may not understand at first that this is the way that the universe works to help us to heal the darker, heavier emotions and step back into the truth of the love that generated them. So, the July after Ken passed, I went to Scotland to spread his ashes. And on my trip there, I had a pretty long layover in JFK. So I shopped and I had sushi and a glass of wine. And then I decided to get a pedicure. The whole time wheeling Ken's remains around in my carry-on. So the salon was pretty quiet. I was the only one that was there waiting. And then another lady came in and sat down next to me. And strangely, as I was on my way to Scotland, she had a Scottish accent. So we started talking, and wouldn't you know that she was originally from Scotland and had married and lived in England, but lost her husband in his mid-40s. So she told me her wonderful story about how fate had intervened, and she ended up getting remarried to his best friend from college, who was American. She told me how both these men she loved were totally different people, but the love was strong and the relationships wonderful with both of them. She was on her way home from just having visited in the UK. And as we went to separate, she said, I have carried this with me for years, but I want you to have it. And she handed me this beautiful poem. It's called Hokusei Says by Roger Keyes, and it speaks to the joy of all living things. I think I shared it in the newsletter once. If you guys haven't seen it, I would suggest looking it up. It's a beautiful poem. But there's more to this story. So while I was in Scotland, I took my friends on this tour of the Highlands for 3 days, which is something that Ken had wanted to do and we hadn't had a chance to. But while I was on this bus tour in the Isle of Skye, I found out that my mother had gone into the hospital for brain surgery. Now, it happened so fast that I didn't have time to end my trip. Before I could, she was out of surgery and recovering. But I sent her a copy of the poem that I had gotten from that woman in JFK. And she loved it. She read it and she read it to everyone who came in her room. So meeting that woman and hearing her story helped me begin to understand that my heart would heal, that love was indeed possible again. And the poem that she gifted me brought my mother strength and helped her to heal. And as the journey continued, I found myself around widows all the time, whether it was standing in line at the grocery store or during a yoga class. And when I started doing readings, it seemed like widows were always drawn to me. It was a while before I realized there was a grand plan to this. That by speaking with each other, by offering love and support to each other, by walking together for a ways, we're not only helping the other person with their grief journey, we're also applying another layer to our own inner pearl, helping ourselves to heal the pain associated with grief and step into the gratitude that is the precious gem of our love. And understanding that separation is just an illusion also ends up becoming the second most important layer of your heart pearl. You begin to understand that your loved one has never really left. Their soul, their essence, is still as much a part of you as before they left their bodies. The only thing that has changed is the way that we experience them. The relationship has not ended. It has actually become more pure, more truthful, more full of love. So I have another reading for you as we assemble this pearl. This one is from An Eternal Career by Frank and Lydia Hammer, and it was written in 1947. Life is dual, and love, true soul love, is the bond of union which reunites the severed parts. The bond exists independent of personal charms or mental endowments. Divine spiritual affinity survives death and the grave, unites the two, and in eternity perfects the dual nature, companions for eternity. Everything in life has its price, and love is no exception. But unlike most other things, love is always worth the cost, which is pain. Love and pain are inseparable. One cannot be had without the other, for eventually death will impose a temporary separation. If, however, one realizes that the separation is only temporary, it will ease the agony of parting and enable one to bear the loneliness and to look forward with absolute certainty to reunion. Where there is love, there is no death, for love is of the deity. No way has ever been found to kill real love. That which perishes is not love, but a counterfeit. If you have ever loved anyone, loved their very soul, you have never ceased to love them. Love is like the soul. It is eternal and does not experience death. So just a moment ago, I told you that understanding that separation is just an illusion is only the second most important layer of this pearl of the heart. So what is the most important layer? What is it that finally leads you out of the shadows of grief and into the light fueled by love? The most important layer is gradually being applied throughout the whole journey. And it completes when we find and step into our own divinity. When we realize that this pain, this process, this journey through grief is about more than just our loved one. It is also about finding ourselves. When we allow ourselves to stop fighting our emotions, when we look at things through a lens of love rather than a lens of loss, when we realize that our strength doesn't come from being able to pay the bills or mow the lawn or fix the car by ourselves, it comes from our connection to our loved ones, to spirit, to the universe. It comes from having been allowed to love. It comes from looking at all of the things which that love has created and understanding that the initial pain of grief is only temporary. When we understand that, like the oyster, that which injures us becomes the basis for our inner beauty. Love is the most powerful energy there is. Real, true love can reach you no matter where you or they are. And there is our pearl. And I'm going to leave you today with a poem that came to me as I was struggling with writing this homily. It's my gift to you, to all of you who are in the process of assembling your own pearls of the heart, no matter where you are on the journey. Here is my hand. Let me walk with you. I know your pain. It is not mine, it is yours alone, but I have felt it. I know it. It connects us. Here is my heart. It has been broken. Light streams through the cracks. Like you, I once thought it fragile. Now I understand it's made of steel, forged with tears, eternal and indestructible. Here is my love. Someone reached out to show me death cannot dim it. It can never be dissolved. Once given, it is forever. The strands reinforced by having existed at all. My hand is their hand. My heart is their heart. My love is their love. We will walk together and gaze towards the horizon, and when you're ready, you will see. Across time and space, love still stands right beside you. Thank you.